Good morning, everyone. I'm Edgar Arriaga. Welcome to the annual event for the CSE Diversity and Inclusivity Alliance. And just for everyone to know, this event is going to be recorded.
Great. And I'm Kara Santelli. I use pronouns she, her. I'm also one of the co-leads of the Alliance. And I'm just really happy to see so many of you online this morning. This is our third annual event, and we have a great itinerary for you today. We're going to hear from a lot of speakers, several speakers, and we'll be introducing those speakers as we go along. But really, we wanted to invite people who would share their perspectives, motivate us, and who've been really active in the Alliance activities for the past few years. And so we'll be hearing from a couple of students as well as Dean Cave. But to get us started today, I wanted to introduce someone who, let me share my screen really quick with you all, who is going to lead us in a land acknowledgement. And so I want to welcome, oh boy, what is going on? There we go. My apologies. I want to welcome Carissa Blue. So Carissa wears many hats in the university, and she uses pronouns she, her, and she currently serves as the Senior Academic Advisor for the MLK program, as well as a departmental advisor to the American Indian Studies Department. And actually in our college, she's involved in ACES. And so she serves as a co-advisor for the American Indian Science and Engineering Society. And she's gonna get us started in a good way today, leading us off with a land acknowledgement. So I'll let Carissa take over. Thanks, Carissa.
Thank you, Kara. Hamatakiapi, Yushki Manchiakapi, Washichia Carissa Makiapi, Dakota Ia, Wakshaka Homaniwea Makiapi, Oyate me Tawakin, Sisituanga, Okaituanga, Bedewa Kantuana Wichakiapi, Pijute Zizik Abioyonke, Hechi Kahawahi, Damako Tahamacha. Good morning, everyone. My name is Carissa Blue, and I'm a citizen of the Dakota Nation from the Upper Sioux community. I'm a senior academic advisor in the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Advising Program and department advisor for American Indian Studies and co-advisor for ACES. Before we start today's event, it's important to recognize and acknowledge the land that the university sits on. The University of Minnesota was built upon occupied, stolen Dakota homeland, which is also home to the Ojibwe and Ho-Chunk tribes. Why do we recognize the land? Northwestern University has a good explanation. To recognize the land is an expression of gratitude and appreciation to those whose territory you reside on, and a way of honoring the Indigenous people who have been living and working on the land from time immemorial. It is important to understand the long-standing history that has brought you to reside on the land, and to seek to understand your place within that history. Land acknowledgements do not exist in a past tense or historical context. Colonialism is a current ongoing process, and we need to build our mindfulness of our present participation. It is also worth noting that acknowledging the land is Indigenous protocol. It is important to remember and recognize every day the full history of Minnesota, including the genocide of American Indian people and how it still affects American Indian communities, including students today. The university acknowledges that words are not enough, and that the institution must provide support, resources, and programs that increase access to all aspects of higher education for our American Indian students, staff, faculty, and community members. While there's much work to be done to repair and build relationships with American Indian communities while protecting and restoring the land, recognizing the Dakota people and their ancestral homelands is an important and necessary entry point. Thank you for watching the following video, which provides a more accurate history of this land, including the non-dominant histories and narratives. And two of the students who are featured in this video, which was made by COIN, the Circle of Indigenous Nations, are U of M students. Rissa is a CLA student majoring in American Indian Studies and Ojibwe, and Polly is a CSE student studying mechanical engineering, and he's also the president of the U of M ACES chapter.
Kiapi, Ishkewanchika, Dakota Bahio, Tina Naje Makiapido, Rashichuya, Polisuya Makiapi. Roso Minishota, Hachianta Hawahi, Tamakota, Gasasituan, Gapetuan, Wichikiapido. Minishota, Winspe, Wankantia, Robadawa, Ga Mechanical Engineering, King Winspe, Chichia. Hi everyone, what I said was it's good to see you all. My Dakota name is Standing Strong in Spirit, and the name I usually go by is Polisuya. I'm from Roseville, Minnesota, which is pretty close to the Twin Cities. I'm of Dakota descent, and my people come from the Situan and the Pegduan tribes out in South Dakota. I go to the University of Minnesota to be a third-year student this year, and I'm studying mechanical engineering. Risa Indigenous Kaja National. The busy Ninjadim, the Kalikang, the Galwa, Binanikag, Ninjuba. University of Minnesota, Uguaya Kandashi, Nuamagu, Yan. Say hello everyone. My name is Risa, my spirit name is Maseka Magokwai, and it means Shining Earthwoman. I'm Eagle Clan, and I'm from the White Earth Nation of Ojibwe people, but I live here in Minnesota. Minneapolis. I'm going to be a fifth-year student this year, and I'm studying Ojibwe language, American Indian Studies, and social justice. Thank you. Did you know that the U of M lies on occupied Dakota territory? In 1851, the treaties of Mendota and Traverse de Sioux ceded 35,000 square miles of land, leaving the Dakota people with only a 20-mile strip along the Minnesota River. Later that same year, Governor Ramsey established the University of Minnesota on that same Dakota land. The school was funded by the US government, which was intended to provide colleges with the benefit of agriculture and the mechanic arts. This marked the first federal aid to higher education, which was 7 years before Minnesota was even considered a state. These treaties were incredibly unfair and were followed by more policies implemented by the United States and Minnesota governments, whose only aim was to continue exploiting indigenous land. In response to these inhumane conditions, Dakota people began to fight back, which led to the United States/Dakota War. It spanned from the fall of 1862 to the spring of 1863. Within that time span, hundreds of Dakota people were placed into an internment camp at Fort Snelling, which is just 15 miles away from campus. Over 300 people died while at the camp due to hazardous living conditions and attacks by soldiers and civilians. Following the end of the war, 38 Dakota men were sentenced to death by the US government with the endorsement of President Abraham Lincoln. On December 26, 1862, the 38 men were hung in Mankato, Minnesota, making it the largest mass execution in U.S. history. In the following spring, Dakota people were banished from the state of Minnesota using the Dakota Expulsion Act. This act abrogated all Dakota treaties and made it illegal for them to live and even exist here in Minnesota. The act applied to all Dakota people regardless of if they participated in the war or not. And in fact, this law has never been appealed. Minnesota is originally a Dakota word, Minishota Makut. It's in fact one of the many words that we use here, along with Chaske, Shakpe, Matopide, Chinchasha, Maketo, and Minitonka. Mini means water, Shota means cloudy or gray, especially meaning the fog or the mist that appears on the water in the morning. And Makoche means land or earth. The Dakota people have always lived here, in fact. The creation site is only 9 miles down the river at the confluence of the Minnesota and Mississippi rivers. There are many sacred sites as well scattered throughout the Twin Cities area. While Minnesota Makoche is motherland to Dakota people, other tribes such as the Ojibwe and Ho-Chunk nations have also lived here long before colonization. They were greatly affected by the exploitation of Minnesota as well. Ojibwe people were forced into the northern half of the state, whereas Ho-Chunk people were forced into Wisconsin. Acknowledging the systematic oppression and genocide we as Indigenous people have experienced and how it affects our communities today is a very important thing to recognize. When discussing the history of Minnesota, the first people of this land is often forgotten about, which only perpetuates the same old oppressive system. Recognizing that we are still here and the indigenous land we live on is only the start of the reparation process.
Thank you for listening and being open to acknowledging a more accurate history of this land, including the non-dominant histories and narratives of indigenous people.
Namine.
Thank you very much, Carissa. It's we really appreciate us to your presence here and to reminding us that we are on native land. Thank you. I will be in charge of the next part here, which is to a tradition that we have as part of the Alliance, and many of our departments are also doing the same, which is to make diversity, equity, and inclusion business as usual. And this slide is dedicated to inclusive language. And just to bring it a little bit of a perspective into why I like this so much, is because as a multilingual person, a person whose first language is not English, we tend to assimilate and learn a lot of these different things. The same thing that happens to a child when they learn and hear that. So culture also is learned that way. And there are many phrases that are not necessarily, that are considered offensive, that are offensive for many people. And we use them every day. And we have here a list of several phrases, why they are problematic, whether it's racism, classism, other isms. Gender language is such a big problem in our community, even if we are embracing DEI and ableist language. So I just wanted to share a couple of things that I think are important, mistakes that I make every day and I try to correct, just to illustrate that it's okay to make mistakes, but it's not okay just to let them go by. So one of the phrases that I learned a lot when I learned English was "you guys," and I use it a lot. And I'm trying to realize that that is considered offensive. That's offensive for many people. So I'm trying to use now "you all," "folks," "folk X," whatever you think is the right appropriate, but not just "you guys." So common in the Midwest. The second one that I think is important is the recognizing and honoring pronouns. If somebody tells us that their pronoun is they, their pronoun is they. It's not their preferred pronoun, it's what they use. So we have to be inclusive, not just say he or she when we are talking to people. Let's use they if we want to refer to them. And last but not least, something that I really have a hard time overcoming is the use of word crazy. My apologies to all of you that I have used those words and you felt offended because of that. There are other ways to use it to refer to what we mean by that word. Absurd, ridiculous, out of control, etc. But don't use the words that are not meant to be right. So I encourage everyone to reflect about this and to start a brand new day trying to avoid the use of phrases that offend many of us. And thank you very much for this time to reflect about that. So I'm going to go to the next slide, please. And a couple of updates about the Alliance. So as Kara mentioned earlier, the Alliance started more than 3 years ago. And as the Alliance progresses, we started with about 20 members. As of today, we have 504 champions. And who are the champions? Well, champions are about half of them are students, graduate students and undergraduates. The other half includes faculty, staff, postdocs, alumni, and leadership. So we are so happy and thankful for all of you for believing in the Alliance and believing that DEI is work for everyone, and we are here to champion them. The second announcement is that as time goes by, it's very important to bring new leadership on board. And today it's my pleasure to announce that Mark Godhealth is joining us as co-lead of the Alliance in January. So right now they are the co-lead elect. And we really would like to, and you'll get a chance to visit with Mark later today. So thank you very much for that, Mark. We really appreciate that. So going on with our agenda, our next item in the agenda is some words by our distinguished Dean Moss Cabeh. And welcome to our annual event, Moss, and looking forward to hearing from you.
Thank you very much, Edgar. Can we get the group together out of the presentation mode? Yeah, I like to see everybody. Wonderful to see you all. I actually, one of my calendars, for whatever reason, and Kara, maybe you can explain this, indicated that we were meeting in Walter 402. Was that the original plan?
That was our hope, was to be in person, but
Okay.
Complications arose with the scheduling of everything. So we decided to host another virtual meeting. So keep it safe for everyone.
So I had great hope. I went upstairs and I was really hoping to get to see at least a number of you in person again, but I will hope that I will do that outside as I go around in different places on the mall or wherever it is. So for now, again, once again, wonderful to see you all by Zoom. You probably know, all of you, that my time as Dean of the College is winding down. We're very excited to be welcoming a new Dean, Andrew Allen, with us in January. Andrew will be joining us January 10th as the next Dean of the College. I actually spent the last day and a half in Chicago at a Big Ten Plus Deans of Engineering meeting, and Andrew was there. So it was great to visit with him and again, share many things that we continue to share in various ways to orient him to University of Minnesota. And I know that he is very excited to getting engaged with this group in particular. And one of the things that I can tell you, which always comes up in these types of leadership meetings we have, and it was the case in Chicago as well yesterday, in our meetings, is a significant focus and conversation around DEI, and really the importance of DEI and the fundamental integration of DEI into everything that we're going to be doing. So this is fairly common. It's very broad. I can tell you the institutions that were at the meeting included, they are colleges of engineering. We happen to be this unique College of Science and Engineering, but I expect that similar things are happening across those institutions as well. But examples clearly were from MIT, Carnegie Mellon, UC Berkeley, Michigan State, the Big Ten school, certainly, because this is a Big Ten Plus, Georgia Tech, and so on and so forth. So it is what this group started, at least in this formal way, within the Alliance about 4 years ago. And I'm now reflecting on my almost 4 years as dean in the college, which really coincides with the establishment and growth of the Alliance, is indeed transformational. It is transformational what this group, you as champions, and I could name many names, but I have to certainly limit myself at this point and give my gratitude to Kara and Edgar for their leadership. But you're all leaders, because you're all really have been carrying the ball and making us better. Is to think back and see what this has meant to the College of Science and Engineering, and particularly what it's meant during a very, very challenging time. I mean, I don't have to remind all of us what's been happening over the past couple of years in so many ways, on the social and racial unrest issues, reckonings, and of course, the COVID and the impact of COVID on particularly marginalized communities and communities within our CSE family who are particularly pressured in so many different ways, facing so many challenges, and what the Alliance has done to lend support for all of us. So it's truly an honor, and for me, and I've said this many times, every time practically that we've met, a learning moment, a learning time for me, because it's been an incredible educational journey for me so far, which is going to continue with your help, with your Alliance. And thank you, Edgar, for the slide that you do. I mean, these are learning moments. We all can use them on a daily basis. And joining you, particularly as somebody with English as a second language, picking things up and coming from, in fact, my mother tongue, which does not have gender-based pronouns. So it's not something that somebody like me had to get used to, because we just didn't use such pronouns. There isn't in Persian, which is my mother tongue. But now moving into these reckonings and learning, and continuously learning, because we have to be continuously reminded. It's so critical what the Alliance has done. I have many times, whether it's been at university events or with colleagues at other institutions, really shown my personal great pride about the Alliance, about what the Alliance has done, because it is really a movement. It is an initiative. It is a leadership that has been grassroots. It's grassroots, and it is a true alliance. It is students. As I was reflecting into the history of how things happened, I know, like many things that happen in academic institutions, students tend to be the vanguard of change. I'm certainly old enough to have been a student during the 60s in college, and at that time, certainly students were vanguard of a lot of change. I mean, if I think about what happened within even 4 or 5 years when I was a student, and because of student activism and so forth, what happened on campuses and the kinds of things that changed as a result of the activism. And similarly here, the student groups in particular that coalesced together, got together and planned essentially the initiation of what has become the Alliance. And I would again repeat my appreciation, my colleagues, Edgar and Kara, representing the two departments, in particular chemistry and earth and environmental sciences, that, and I believe perhaps physics and astronomy, that from a departmental side were similarly moving in the direction of change and support and change in climate in a more formalized way within their units, which together then the essentially student-initiated activities and conversations together with what was happening from these really leading departments within the college coalesced into what became the Alliance, and the rest is history. And again, this is why this is so important. This is why what you're all doing, what you all have done, is so different from many others, because it is really come from the bottom. It's and the rest of us, frankly, have been educated and taken with you. So thank you for leading the way. And the college is certainly committed. The departments are fully committed to the commitments to improving the climate and sense of belonging within science, technology, engineering in particular. And it certainly fields that have not been very welcoming historically to the diverse groups that the Alliance has certainly, and all of us trying to really deal with and fix. I can tell you also that, and this again comes from the kind of conversations that were happening yesterday, so it's fresh off the press, that these initiatives are very likely, and we have some work to do, moving to the curriculum side in science and engineering. In engineering, certainly within the American Society of Engineering Education, within the Big 10 plus engineering deans, it is there is a commitment. There's a workshop being planned about how to bring in issues related to DEI into the engineering curriculum. So stay tuned. A lot is going to happen, and a lot is going to really need the leadership of a group like the Alliance to help us all in that respect. Similarly, our departments, a number of our departments have already started reevaluating their promotion and tenure and merit criteria to include contributions and activities within the DEI framework. And again, the tendency is to be thinking about these as natural, integrated, daily activities within everything that we do. So rather than, for example, thinking about research, teaching, and service, and then something called diversity and equity and inclusivity, for example, activities, to really think about these in an integrated way. That it is just natural for us in everything that we do to be thinking in terms of an equitable, inclusive, appropriate way for all of us to feel comfortable and deal with the unfortunate situations that we've historically and continually facing in these regards. So I don't want to take any more of your time. Let me again thank Kara, because she plans to just reduce her time a little bit. Thank you again, Kara, for all your leadership so far and continuing as you go on with your plans. In January, Edgar, thank you for agreeing to continue at least through the spring semester with your co-leadership, and welcome, Mark. And thank you for agreeing to take on the co-leadership in January as well. I look forward to certainly being engaged and contribute to the extent I can when I go back to my department as a full-time faculty member in January. So thank you all again. Looking forward to a great meeting. I have another meeting coming up right after this, so unfortunately I won't be able to stay the whole time, but I will stay as long as I can. Thank you again.
Thank you so much, Dean Cave. I just want to say thank you for your support over the years. It has really enabled the Alliance to grow and to keep moving forward and to keep progressing some of the initiatives that we've set forward on. And you've been a supporter in many ways, and I really appreciate when I hear you championing the efforts of everyone in the Alliance, because it really is all of us working really hard to move some of these things forward and to really improve the climate. And I don't think we would have been as successful if we didn't have the support of the leadership. So thank you very much. Congratulations. We will still see you around. Maybe we'll wrangle you in sometime. So thank you, Dean Cave.
Thank you again.
Okay, let's see. Let me share my screen again. So I am going to introduce the first of two student speakers that we have today. And we wanted to continue elevating the voices of students here who have given so much to the Alliance, to the university, and are really leaders both in an academic framework and leaders in the DEI space here at the university. And so our first speaker today, many of you probably know, is Becky Rodriguez. And when I was looking for how to introduce Becky, I was sent an incredible list of accolades, only of which a few I've selected here. But Becky has been very active on the Alliance. She serves as a co-lead for the Student Experience Action Group. But just a few of her merits, she has many, many of them, both for her research, for her science in chemistry, but also for the DEI work. And recently, as in 2021, she was awarded the Josie R. Johnson Human Rights and Social Justice Award, which is she is the first recipient of that award in CSE. She was also selected in 2021 as the President's Student Leadership and Service Award. And she was recently recognized as a rising star in the Analytical Chemistry Diversity Colloquium. So I will pass it along to you, Becky, to hear what you have to share with all of us.
Thank you, Cara. And thank you for speaking so highly of me. Do you mind clicking slides? Wonderful. So good morning, everyone. As Cara mentioned, my name is Becky. Rebecca is my government name. And I am technically a 6th year graduate student in the chemistry department. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about sort of my outreach and community engagement first, and then a little bit about myself. I think that you can see this long list of different things that I've been a part of. And of course, I showed some science demos, which is something I'm really passionate about, is bringing science to kids. But usually the explosions are what's most exciting to show in picture form. But I think that really the long list of things that I have been a part of, I like to say I wear different hats, speaks to the different things that are available at the University of Minnesota to be involved in. And so I have served 2 years now as the Society for the Advancement of Chicano, Hispanic, and Native Americans in Science or STEM, University of Minnesota's chapter president. I've also served as the Women in Science and Engineering Officer for the Chemistry, Diversity, and Inclusion Committee, as a mentor through WISE and SWE, the Society for Women Engineers. I joined the Alliance and quickly became approached to be a co-lead. I think it's because I talk a lot that I was approached to sort of do this kind of work. Pre-COVID, I spent a lot of time putting on science demonstrations at the Science Museum of Minnesota for kids, for Latinx and Science Day, Women in STEM Day, Chemistry Week, which is this week actually. I've also served as a mentor through Científico Latino, which is a international organization who, if you don't know much about, you should definitely get involved in, where people serve as mentors to various undergrads all over the world to be able to apply to graduate school in order to increase the numbers of underrepresented students in STEM. And I've also served on the Council of Graduate Students as the chemistry representative, and briefly was part of ACS Poly PIMSI as an officer. And so I say these things in that one, there's so much to get involved in on campus. Whatever you're passionate about, you can sort of take on leadership roles or attend different events. But also I think it speaks to the fact that I feel that a lot of these spaces need representation. And if I am the first in these spaces, it is okay with me as long as it's followed by other students. And so Cara, if you could click next. So a little bit about me. I grew up in Charlotte, North Carolina. I did my undergrad at American University in Washington, DC. I graduated in 2016. I also did a research experience for undergrads at Duke University actually, ironically enough, in the electrical and computer engineering department, doing chemistry research, very different. And I started at the University of Minnesota in the chemistry department in 2016. I received my master's in 2018, and I am actually defending the first week of November, which is pretty terrifying considering that I have to submit my thesis this Friday. So my research is in the detection of food contaminants with polymers and surface enhanced Raman spectroscopy. So CSE does incredible, science here. I'm very lucky to be a part of it. But I think I spent a lot of time in higher education, sort of hiding who I was, slightly because I was a little bit ashamed that my background was so different than my peers. And I kept quiet about it for a long time. And it wasn't until I started, one, going to therapy, but two, sort of finding people who advocated for me and who saw me for who I was, that I felt more comfortable sharing this part of me. And I'm happy to say that I'm lucky to be able to talk about it with you all today. So I am a first generation student of Latinx descent. I grew up in a low income household. My parents came to the United States in the mid 80s, undocumented, and hoping for a better life for my sisters and I. My parents only finished 6th grade and 9th grade. My dad stopped going to school pretty early in 6th grade, which is technically only elementary school in Mexico, because he had to work. And my mom only finished to 9th grade, which is middle school in Mexico, because you have to pay to go to high school. And it was sort of not looked upon or for her because she was a woman, and it made more sense to invest in her brother's educations. So knowing that, I came into sort of the field of chemistry, not really knowing that one day I would be in a doctorate program. I say that, dreams of mine that I didn't know existed are what I'm living right now, because that seemed so far off from my trajectory. I grew up in a place where some people don't make it out of our neighborhood, and I'm very lucky that I am here today, but that is to say that I haven't forgotten where I've come from. And like I said, I spent a lot of time just not really telling these things about myself, that my mom cleans houses and my dad works maintenance at a church, because I thought that it was almost taboo to talk about the fact that my parents were not educated in the way that I was, that I held this incredible amount of privilege for being able to attend any sort of university or higher education, and sort of the weight that comes with that. It's more than just saying that I'm going to go to school and it be fine. It's an entire village of people who are counting for you, and that goes a lot into it's scary to fail, and I have failed a lot in grad school, but I've also succeeded. And there was a lot of people who told me, even in my first year of grad school, that I would probably not make it out, that it was in my best interest to probably leave, that I wasn't as competitive as my peers. And one, I think it's gone to show that everyone has very different background and everyone brings something different to the table. And that is what makes, science so incredible, is that we have so many different perspectives, and you can see that in the College of Science and Engineering. But it also goes to show that there's a lot of people still working against people like me, people from a different background, people who are first generation, people who are people of color. And there are ways to improve on that. Cara, do you mind going to the next slide? Thank you. So when I was thinking about what I wanted to say here, I really wanted to hone in on two questions. And one is, how can we be better? If you click next. And so firstly, it's for advocating for the needs and interests of Black, Indigenous, people of color, LGBTQA+, disabled folks, first-generation individuals, low-income backgrounds, and others from marginalized identities and backgrounds. Our needs are different, and we do not always need the same thing, but there's oftentimes someone who needs help and they're afraid to ask for it. And so if there's someone who has this ability to speak for them in closed doors, it's incredibly helpful to retaining people like myself. If you click next. And I think it's really important to remember that out of all of these identities, there's so much intersectionality. And because of it, our backgrounds are different, but our needs and our interests are different. And so remembering that what works for one person is not necessarily going to work for all. And so it is incredibly important that we who are in places of privilege, for one, being educated, and two, having the means to be educated, work constantly to make sure that we help those who need it most. Next. And so the next question I wanted to ask was, how do I become a better advocate? You know, like if we're advocating for all these people, how do I take on that task? So if you click next. One is nominating BIPOC and other marginalized students for awards, fellowships, accolades, especially when you are in closed rooms. I would not be where I am today had I not been for incredible mentors and friends who have constantly believed in me when I did not believe in myself, who work really hard to put my name into places, and I've shown it. I had someone, you know, in my first couple of years of grad school who, you know, didn't think that I would still be here. And I think that I've shown that not only am I good scientifically, but I also have been good to be able to give back to the communities I really care about. Click next. The onus of finding safe spaces should not be placed on marginalized individuals. I didn't find a place that I felt comfortable being myself until my third year of grad school, meaning that my first 2 years of grad school, really my first 2.5 years of grad school, were incredibly isolating. And so making information readily available to where people can be themselves and be around people who look like them, who believe the same things, is incredibly important. And I'm really glad that the Alliance exists to be able to constantly provide more and more information about student organizations, about events going on, trainings, all of those places that are meant to be a safe space. Click next. Fund our ideas. I can speak volumes on how important this is, but I do want to say that I just put on a symposium this past weekend for underrepresented groups in the Twin Cities all over, and it was incredibly successful. And I worked really hard alongside my wonderful research group to be able to make it happen. But when I had this idea 3 years ago, no one thought it was a good idea. And so funding our ideas in order to bring success and also to give spaces, again, safe spaces to marginalized individuals is incredibly important. Next. Believe those struggling with mental health. Again, in sharing transparency, I struggle with anxiety and depression, as well as PTSD. And in the beginning of grad school, I didn't know how to deal with that. And I had people tell me that, you know, they didn't necessarily believe or understand in some regards, like what to do with me. And I think that goes beyond being like, here are some, you know, places to look into. It goes working with students, especially those who have to carry so much weight, as we've seen, due to police brutality, due to racism, due to just so much that first, people who struggle with mental health have to carry, but secondly, those who come from marginalized identity that have to carry on the weight of what goes on around them because they do not feel safe. And so believing those struggling with mental health, as well as working with them to ensure that they survive, and every day is a battle. And that is hard, but it is, again, important to work with students and staff, faculty, friends, in order to have them stay with us throughout their time. If you click next. And as I've sort of hinted at, marginalized students are not a monolith. We constantly have to revisit these conversations. We have to work hard to make sure that our needs are met and that we allow people in spaces that are historically have not been involved in. When I started grad school, I was the only woman of color my year in my department. And at first I found it to be fine. And as the time went on, I realized just how isolating that is. And as years have gone on, our incoming graduate classes have been incredibly diverse, but it doesn't go without speaking on the fact that behind closed doors, people like myself have had to fight to make that happen. And so we, as a collective, need to make sure that we're not putting all of that weight on marginalized individuals to have to fight to be able to bring other students that look like them to the places that they deserve to be. And with that, I really just want to, one, thank you all for listening, but two, to remember that it sometimes can be isolating and hard and difficult and sad to be in school and realize that you're not like anybody else. I've used that to my advantage, but there are many of people who can't do the same things that I've done, that have been bold, that have been loud, that have been, quite frankly, a little annoying. And I think we need to keep those people in mind, especially moving forward with the Alliance and with the College of Science and Engineering. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Becky. It is so important to listen to what you said, to hear what you said, to really listen, to reflect on what you said. Just hearing you talk certainly motivates me personally. You know, I think it motivates all of us here. It's why we're here in the Alliance. So thank you so much for sharing everything today. Okay, so I'm really happy to introduce our next speaker, who is an undergraduate. Sadika Prabhu is a junior in BME, and we really wanted to hear from Sadika. Sadika has been with us since she started, basically, as a student here in CSE, and has been a big champion of many efforts. And it's just, yeah, from the very get-go, she's been involved in the student experience team and has done things like spoken to the incoming class, the first year class of undergraduates, to share her perspective, share her ideas, share her experiences. And I really am excited to welcome her here today. She's also a fundraising officer for Engineers Without Borders and has recently started to get involved as a mentor in Rooted in STEM. So Sadika, I'm excited to hear what you have to share with us today.
Hi, everybody. Really excited to share a story today. And I just wanted to say, I really enjoyed what you shared, Becky. I've been in like very school mindset these first 2 months of the school year. So I haven't like heard very relatable stories as of late. And that hit very deep because it's different hearing a relatable story versus writing your own. So yeah, really appreciated that. Also, I don't know if Dean Cave is still here, but very excited about the thought of moving our curriculum to our engineering curriculum. I'd like to hear more about that. But yeah, so today I will be sharing a little bit of my story of finding my space in CSE. As you all probably know, it's a very disorienting transition going from high school to the college experience, and the U does a lot of great work to help students navigate it. I was a Welcome Week leader this last month, a really good time, and the Office of Transition Experiences does a really good job. But there are some spaces where extra work is needed. And so I'm just going to touch on like a couple of those thoughts that I've had. And just like reflecting on how that matched up with like my school experience in CSE. And starting with my freshman year, where if I'm going to be honest, that was a time where I didn't really notice how much I was forcing myself to fit in until I went home for winter break my freshman year and started interacting with my high school friends and my family. And I realized how much I'd been toning myself down to fit in. And that really went on for the whole semester. And it was honestly because even though I found friends and a community in like the WISE LLC, Women in Science and Engineering, and Engineers Without Borders, I wasn't really surrounded with people who shared my background. And for some folks where that maybe that's something you just don't totally comprehend, I would imagine it as like, you know, you've gone to a function with that one friend and it's all of their friends and you're just trying to find a way to blend in for the night, but doing that for an entire semester. And honestly, by the time I was figuring out how to get out of that space of like, okay, only do like STEM focused stuff and like being like, okay, I'm going to connect with some cultural groups on campus. COVID hit and I was basically stuck with the connections I'd already established. Not stuck in a bad way where like they were all hurting me, but just not always totally relating to me. But that spring of freshman year was also when I was introduced to the CSE DNI Alliance student committee. And that was where I found people who I was able to connect with and people who were willing to have a full conversation about why, you know, CSE hadn't really met its standards yet on what it needs to do to make sure that every student was really feeling welcome and supported. And by full conversation, I guess what I mean is really being in a space where I felt like if I was having a difficult or uncomfortable conversation, I wasn't just sombering the mood. I was taking action, and I wasn't being made to feel that I was like ignoring what my only focus should be of like, get that 4.0. I was doing like valuable work. And so, yeah, I really appreciate the Alliance for that. And yeah, so been able to start becoming a process of establishing the dean's meetings where students are able to make their voices heard. That was a really awesome effort. And as well as being a part of the committee's ongoing 3 goals. And I'll kind of touch on a little, all 3 of those and kind of how I think about them. The first one being making research opportunities more accessible. With like, and I guess as an undergraduate student, the reason that's super relevant is because when you're starting off in college, cold emailing a professor who you don't totally relate to, they don't know anything about you, don't really know anything about them, is super duper intimidating. And I guess I would just put this out there for any professors listening that really like talk about your research and like, even if you're talking with a bunch of freshmen who don't understand the technical details of everything, there's honestly no other exposure that they're going to get unless you're talking about it and the opportunities that exist in your lab space. Just because, yeah, that cold emailing process isn't like super accessible means of attaining research. Because I mean, as all of us know, as we get more involved with the university, your emails definitely pile up. MN Dining is in there every week. But yeah, that's one of our first goals, is making research more accessible. The second one being making a reporting system that is well advertised and more standardized. And I found that topic to be super relevant after my sophomore year, where I was in this apartment with 3 other roommates. And one of them was someone who had a lot of negative biases that I was learning about, and really wish I could have addressed in a more organized fashion. But really what it came down to in the end was me and my roommates asking for her not to live with us anymore, and having to process all of the emotions and post effects of that on our own. So having a reporting system that's like more trustworthy, more advertised, and more accessible to students, I think is really important after going through that experience. And then last but not least, recognition of those doing DEI work, like Becky. So yeah, and really just like making sure that the college is putting in more efforts to showcase how important the work that we're doing is by showing it on bigger platforms, like when talking with freshmen during Welcome Week, expressing that this is a space that they can join and feel a part of. Like we've started with like the panel, and professors discussing it if they're a part of the Alliance and like the work that they do. Yeah, and really when it comes to the Alliance, what I only wish is that I'd heard about it earlier. And so that's why I'm really excited about more of our recruitment efforts this year as we've been in person, and seeing all of the students who are also very excited now that we're in person to get involved with our group. And on the topic of being in person, I am very excited to now have been able to connect with student groups that I feel like support me, like the Indian Student Association and the Society of Asian Scientists and Engineers. And honestly, it's also just really nice to see that there's a bunch of other students like me benefiting from being able to interact with those STEM specific cultural groups and seeing all the support that CSE is providing for them. Yeah, it's just like really nice to see now in my 3rd year. But also, while these student groups are great, they are also a prime example, I think, of where it feels like I see students doing a lot of the grunt work when it comes to creating an inclusive environment. And I think one of those examples would be when it comes to mental health. Freshman year through now, I've seen a variety of student groups advertising like, you know, stress-free nights, ways to like deal with, you know, the stress of being in CSE. But I've always thought it was very curious that it was students who are struggling with their mental health themselves, being the ones who are organizing help for other students, their peers, with no formal education of how to do so. And I really think that's a space where like CSE could jump in as a college and be like, yeah, we will do a bit more to make those efforts more organized. Or when it comes to like DRC accommodations, I honestly wasn't super aware of what those entailed until I had to like help multiple of my peers navigate receiving those. And I really think it's something that is just so easy for professors when they're asking for DRC letters in the beginning to also be like, hey, here's the website that you go to if you want to like look for that, or here are examples of why you might need a DRC letter, because you know, it's not always because, oh, I broke my right arm and I need to like speak out my equations. There's more to it than that. Testing anxiety and so on. And so really just making sure that there's better awareness of those resources that we have. Because when you're a new student or like an undergraduate student, it takes a while to find those resources. And I don't think that needs to be the case. And really at the core of what I'm trying to share with my story is that I am seeing a lot of students who are trying to build up CSE's DEI abilities. And while there are faculty helping, the ratio is just all wrong. I really want to be able to see like all of my professors in meetings like this. I want to see all faculty members really taking actions to help their students. And really the baseline of my story is that it should not have taken me until my junior year, or Becky till her 3rd year of grad school at the U, to really feel like we found our space in this college. Because at the end of the day, we're still students who are establishing ourselves in this space, while faculty have, I believe, the opportunity to create change with students. and see it through even after 4 years is up, and be that kind of pillar for change. And since that's not the case yet, I think that it's really important and really good that we're putting effort into recognizing those who are taking on the additional workload and emotional burden that really comes with every conversation or committee meeting that they join. And I really think it's great that there's been recognition events set up for the end of the school year. And I'm really excited to see more efforts taken not only in that space, but like I mentioned earlier, in creating more accessibility to research, creating a trustworthy reporting system, supporting students' mental health. And I think these are really good key ideas to keep in mind when we as an alliance or as individuals in the group are wondering about what action steps to take. Just honestly look at what students have already been trying to do, because the blueprint is already there. We just need someone to validate and support them, whether it's through funding, whether it's through sharing about it on a larger platform. And I know that CSE is so capable of that. And so, yeah, very excited for those kind of changes to take place. And I've already seen some of that happening with the Alliance. So yeah, thank you all for listening. And that's all for me.
Thank you, Sadika, so much for sharing everything. Just to hear you motivate us. I think it's so important to hear from all of the students and just listen to what you say. Hopefully, we'll continue to create more spaces and do what your recommendations are, right? Make people really from the get-go, the minute they arrive, know that they are welcome here and they have a place, they have a community. So I appreciate everything you are doing with the Alliance to really move forward, sharing of ideas, to move forward some of the action items for reporting, to move forward, so many of the ideas that you all as students have really been advocating for. So I'm really happy to hear how you've been involved in supporting these efforts. Thanks, Sadika. Okay, so very briefly, we are a little past time, but Lindsay Fisher has agreed to give a few quick updates, just maybe point out some of the recent activities just from the past year that we're really proud of in the Alliance. So Lindsay, do you want to quickly step in?
Yeah, hello everyone, I'm Lindsay. I use she, her pronouns. If you want to learn about the first 5 items on that PowerPoint, I would encourage you to join the workshop. And I did post in the chat what action group the different events or highlights corresponded with.
Lindsay,
So
we're not seeing the slide anymore. Oh, there it is. Sorry.
Okay. Sorry about that. So jumping down to the bottom items, just a few highlights that we wanted to share with you is that if you aren't already a champion and you join, you'll start getting biweekly communications from us. Every 2 weeks, we send out an email that has upcoming DEI events, and it also has some relevant DEI news there. So we would really encourage you to do that. The Alliance has been working on analyzing the CSE results. So the CSE is the Student Engagement at Research Universities survey. We have analyzed the 2018 undergraduate CSE results, and we're currently working with the Office of Institutional Research on a dashboard for easily viewing grad CSE results. This will help us define benchmarks for the Alliance. And finally, committee encounters. So the Alliance has been hosting a committee encounter for all of the different CSE departmental DEI committees every 2 months. We invite members from each of the departmental diversity committees together, share ideas, and create synergies across the college. So those are some of the things that we have been up to and we're excited about. If you want to go to the next slide here. So if you want to join us, if you're not already a champion, we highly suggest that you join to be a champion. And if you are a champion but want to be a little bit more engaged, we would encourage you to join the action team. There's the links there to either become a champion or to express your interest in the different action teams.